Hello and welcome to Spoiler Alert. Today, we are going to see an action, adventure, drama movie called The Count of Monte Cristo. The movie starts with Edmund and his best mate, Fernand, two crew members of the boat Pharaoh. In an attempt to save their captain who had contracted brain fever, they decide to have their ship redirected to Elba against Danglars. The ship's second-in-command orders, who argued against going offshore as the island was guarded by the British, who also held their captive Napoleon Bonaparte. After they get of the boat, the guard spots them and they get in a fight. Trying to escape, they unexpectedly get faced to Napoleon, who says to the guards that they are not his spies, so the guards leave them alone. Napoleon helps them with his doctor. The two of them celebrates. Edmund throws to Fernand a chess piece saying "King to you, Fernand." Napoleon comes in the room and asks to talk to Dantes in private. Dantes goes. He asks him if he can deliver a secret letter for him to Marseille. Edmund accepts. Fernand saw through the window when Napoleon gave him the letter. When Edmund gets back to the room, Fernand asks him what did he want. Edmund lied, saying news from France. After Edmund falls asleep, Fernand takes the letter from his pocket and reads it. After a few hours, Napoleon comes to the room informing them that their captain died, and it's time for them to leave. On their return to Marseille, Morel tells them to report to his office. After they explained what happened, Morel decided to make Edmund captain of the Pharaoh, much to the anger of Danglars. Clarion, who was supposed to pick the letter, shows up at Morel's office and asks for Edmund. Morel says he left. Meanwhile, his best mate Fernand hits on his fiancée Mercedes. He asks her when does she think Edmund can afford a wife, and she says 2 years because then he can have his captain papers. Edmund shows up, prompting Mercedes to kiss him, making Fernand, his best mate, jealous. He gives them the news that he is now captain of the Pharaoh. Hearing this, Fernand leaves in a quiet stupor and jealousy for Edmund's happiness. Edmund says to Mercedes that he will have married her as soon as he can afford a ring. She says she doesn't need a ring. She takes a string from her scarf and ties it on her finger, saying, "This will be my ring." Then Fernand, drunk and depressed, runs by Danglars and reveals everything about the letter from Napoleon that Edmund has, making Danglars think to turn him in. While celebrating his promotion with Mercedes and his father, Edmund is arrested by authorities in front of his family and taken to the magistrate. After reading the letter from Edmund, Villefort asked him if he read it. Edmund says he doesn't know how to read. At this point, Villefort releases Edmund. Before exiting the door, Villefort asks Edmund who was supposed to pick the letter, and he says Clarion, who actually is Villefort's father. When Villefort hears this, he takes the letter, burns it and offers Edmund a ride home, but he is actually arrested and taken to Château d'If, a maximum security prison. He manages to escape the guards and runs to his best mate's house Fernand, to ask him for help. Edmund finds out that Fernand betrayed him, saying that it was Danglars' idea after telling him about the letter. When Edmund asks him why, he says because you're the son of a clerk, and I'm not supposed to want to be you. The authorities enter the house and take Edmund to jail. After arriving with a boat at the Château d'If, he meets the warden d'Orléans. Edmund says to him that he is innocent. D'Orléans says he truly knows because at Château d'If, they imprisoned only the ones they are ashamed of. D'Orléans takes Edmund to his cell and starts whipping him with a lash. Since then, it whips him every year. Edmund loses his faith in God because of the consistent beatings. After some years spent alone in the cell, an old man's head pops out through the floor, scaring Edmund. The old man introduces himself as Abbé Faria, a prisoner for 11 years, 5 of which he spent digging the tunnel that lead to Edmund's cell. Faria asks Edmund to help him dig the tunnel so they can escape, and in exchange, he will teach him everything he knows. Economics, mathematics. As they are working at the tunnel, the old man reveals that he was a soldier who had burned down a church with a band of rebels inside. Then he decided to turn to religion as a priest, to repent for his sins. He worked as a private secretary for enormously rich Enrique Spada. Sadly, a couple of years later, Spada died after rumors were out that he had hidden his enormous fortune. Napoleon didn't believe Faria didn't know where the treasure was hidden, so he kept him imprisoned there until he refreshes his memory. After some talk, the priest helps Dante figure out the reason for his imprisonment, thus making him realize that Villefort sent him to prison to protect himself, as the letter was supposed to reach to Mr. Clarion, none other than Villefort's father. At some point, Edmund, knowing that the priest was a soldier, asks him if he can teach him to fight. The priest is reluctant, but Edmund says teach me or dig alone, so the priest teaches him the skills of the sword. As they dig in the tunnel one day, there's a cave-in, trapping the priest in the tunnel. Edmund pulls him out of the tunnel, but the priest fatally injured. With his last breath he tells Edmund to search under some loose rocks. Edmund finds a map. The priest then admits that he knew all the time where the treasure of Spada was hidden, saying, he's a priest, not a saint. He tells Edmund to use his head and follow the clues in order to find the treasure. As his final lesson, the priest tells Edmund, "Do not commit the crime, which you now serve the sentence. God said vengeance is mine." Edmund says he doesn't believe in God, the priest replying, "It doesn't matter, he believes in you." Then the priest dies. The guards show up at the door cell, prompting the priest to get his plate, so they can serve them food. Upon opening the shaft and not getting an answer from the priest, they see him lying on the floor, dead, so he closes the shaft and goes to report the death. Meanwhile, Edmund hides in the tunnel, crying, as the guards put the priest in a bag. After they leave to get Dorliac, the prison warden, Edmund gets out of the tunnel to say goodbye to the priest, when he has the idea to take the body of the priest through the tunnel in his cell, and he takes his place in the bag. When Dorliac and the guards came, not knowing that Edmund is in the bag, they tie his legs with a chain and take him to the cliff, so they can throw the body in the water. Just before throwing him in the water, Edmund takes his hand out of the bag, grabbing the keys that opens the chain from his legs from Dorliac's waist, pulling him in the water. After Edmund manages to open his chains and gets on the surface, he sees Dorliac beside him and a fight starts, ending up drowning Dorliac. Edmund washes up on a shore. After waking up and realizing he's free, he runs and cheers on the beach, encountering a band of pirates. Here we meet Luigi Vampa, the head of the pirates that came to this island to bury alive one of their mate Jacopo, who decided to keep some gold to himself instead of splitting it with his crew. Luigi Vampa makes Edmund fight for his life with Jacopo, for the entertainment of the crew and for a place beside them as a crew member. Edmund wins, but spares Jacopo, telling Luigi Vampa that both of their talents can be put to good use if he keeps them both. Luigi accepts, and they name Edmund Zatara, that means driftwood. Jacopo pledges his life to Edmund for sparing him, saying, "I'm your man forever." After some years, the band makes their way back to Marseille, where Luigi encourages Edmund to leave as he can't make it right by staying on the boat, so he decides to leave. Jacopo accompanying him. After instructing Jacopo to get a boat that can carry the both of them, Edmund goes to Morel's house and meets again after many years. Upon realizing that Morel doesn't recognize him, Edmund doesn't say anything about his identity and asks about Edmond Dantes. Morel tells him that Edmund's father had hung himself after his son was sent to prison, and that Villefort is now a chief prosecutor after the mysterious death of his father. His best mate Fernand has inherited his father's estate after his death, and Mercedes, Edmund's fiancée, has married Fernand. Edmund leaves a small bag of gold for the financially crippled Morel, who had his company taken over by Danglars. Edmund meets Jacopo and tells him he got a boat. They both sail to the island of Monte Cristo, to the location of the map that he had from the priest. They discover a wealth beyond their imagination, but rather than settling to a leisure life, he decides to take revenge on Fernand, Danglars, Mercedes, and Villefort. He becomes a count. He uses some of his riches to purchase a huge estate near Paris, and plans a party where he invites everyone from the high society, but Mercedes and Fernand doesn't show up. He then proclaims himself to be the Count of Monte Cristo. Edmund begins applying pressure to Fernand's financial life, closing all his paths. Jacopo tells Edmund that Mercedes and Fernand has a son, Albert. The Count then pays Luigi Vampa to stage a kidnapping of their son. This leads to the salvation of Albert by none other than the Count himself. After saving his life, Edmund introduces himself as Count of Monte Cristo and invites Albert to his estate for breakfast. Upon arriving at his house, Albert asks the Count how did he know about his kidnapping. The Count says that he pays well to stay informed about everything of note in any city he stays. Albert invites the Count to his birthday and to meet his parents in Paris. The Count arrives at Monjago estate. Albert, dressed in his mother's tights, greets the Count and introduced to his parents the man who saved his life, the Count of Monte Cristo. Edmund invites Mercedes to a waltz. Meantime, Villefort and his wife appears. The Count shows up thanking them they could come to see him while he is still in town. He invited them there, as he had some business with Villefort, taking him for a discussion in private. Instead of keeping the toast for Albert's birthday, Fernand leaves to talk to Villefort about the discussion he had with the Count, saying to Villefort that Albert told him the Count had mentioned a shipment called Spada, and the word gold. They realize the next shipment that will arrive probably contains the treasure as the Count asked Villefort if he can help him avoid problems with some inspections on a shipment that will arrive. So together with Danglars they plan to steal the treasure. Meantime at the guest table, Mercedes embarrassed, trying to excuse Fernand's absence from the toast. The Count sees this, and he intervenes, saying he asked permission to keep the toast, so he keeps the toast. After that, Mercedes takes note of his mannerisms that Edmund had, so she presumes it's him, prompting her to hide in his carriage and confront him. Calling him Edmund, but the Count replies he is not this Edmund. The carriage turns, and she gets off, saying, "You are right, You cannot be my Edmund. The Count replies Edmond Dantes is dead. The Count then invites Jacopo inside his carriage and threatens him saying, he will finish the job the day he meet him if he ever intervenes in his affairs. When the shipment arrives, the theft takes place as expected, but the thieves are caught in the act as part of Edmund's trap. While trying to offload the shipment, Danglars faces the Count. After attacking him a couple of times with no success, Edmund traps Danglars with a rope around his neck. Danglars asks him who is he. He replies, I'm the Count of Monte Cristo, but my friends call me Edmond Dantes. He leaves him to hang, but he tells the guards to cut the rope before he can't talk. Then he meets with Villefort, telling him he wanted to thank him in person for the help with the shipment. The Count tricks him into admitting his involvement in his father's murder, Villefort saying that he has no proof, no witnesses, only theories. He says, Fernand is the one who pulled the trigger, he will never confess it. He pulls a drape, revealing that there were also authorities in the room, witnessing the entire discussion. He gets arrested for conspiracy to murder. Villefort takes another look at the Count and asks, Dantes? Finally, realizing who he is, he gets taken to the carriage by the guards, and finds a gun inside, in case he wants to take his life, a courtesy of a gentleman. After he gets the courage to shoot himself, he pulls the trigger, and sees that the gun is empty. Edmond jumps in the back of the carriage, saying to Villefort, you didn't think I would make it this easy? Then the carriage leaves. When Edmond gets home, he finds Mercedes in his room. Mercedes says she realized that he said the name Dantes, a name that she didn't mention. She asks him where he was, and he replies 13 years in Chateau d'If and everywhere else. Edmond asks why didn't she wait for him, saying she married the man who betrayed him. Then she shows him that she still has the string that she tied on her finger. They spend the night together. Next morning, Jacopo tells Mercedes that today she will accompany the Count in leaving the country with her son. Mercedes goes home to pack her bags. Upon arriving, she finds Fernand, packing in a panic, telling her to hurry up because the authorities are coming to arrest him for piracy, corruption and murder. Mercedes tells him she is not coming, but Fernand says she is his wife, so she should go and find his son. Mercedes says he is not his son and that Albert is the son of Edmond Dantes. Fernand rides to his old family estate. Upon arriving at the location, where him and Villefort hide the treasure intended to steal, only to find out that the chests have nothing but sand in them, beside one that has a king chess piece, reminding him about the game he used to play with Edmond when they were young. Then the Count appears, revealing his true identity as Edmond, confronting Fernand for his betrayal. Edmond attacks Fernand, takes his sword and corners him in one move. Albert arrives at the location and in order to protect his father he intervenes trying to fight Edmond. Edmond threatens to kill Albert if he gets in the way. Mercedes and Jacopo arrives before the fight is finished and reveals to both Edmond and Albert that Edmond is his real father. Shocked at the fact that Fernand let him fight to death with his own father in order to save his own life, Albert lets his guard down. Fernand takes advantage of this moment and tries to shoot Albert, but his gun goes off, wounding Mercedes. Then Fernand rides away. After realizing there's nothing left for him, he rides back, demanding Edmond to get out and fight him. Jacopo hands him the sword. He goes out to face Fernand as Albert and Jacopo tend to Mercedes. Fernand says he can't leave a life where Edmond has everything, and he has nothing. Then a violent sword fight starts that ends with Edmond killing Fernand. With his last words, Fernand asks Edmond, what happened to your mercy? Where Edmond responds, I'm a count, not a saint. After some time, Edmond returns to Chateau d'If. He visits the place accompanied by Mercedes, Albert, and Jacopo. He says he bought the land and the Chateau d'If prison to put it down, but decided to keep it as a reminder of his past. Edmond promises that from now on, the treasure will be used only for good. Then they all leave the island together. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.